mawiri ko hura tū mana wapore ko hura tū manoa uha. Te rea ana ki te moana, te pipi hawhake i a whakautunu ka whakauturingi he paupau, he takataka uga mani he loki hau. Ko tō mana wako taku mana wako ta mana wanui nōrangi, ka whakaputi ki te whai au ki te ao marama hui ake. Hui te marama, hui te mai ora haumi e, hui e! It's not a bad tie here, but we want to get the meeting off to a good start, or else we won't be paddling on Waikanae tomorrow. Haumi e, hui e! Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you. All the best, goes always.
Kia ora, Derek. It's always really comforting to know that following you that we've had the ultimate and that you know, by following up with our taiki that you know, I can go for a paddle tomorrow and feel a bit more comfortable. So thank you, sir, as always. Kia ora koutou. My name's Matt Cairns. I'm a former employee of Trust Tairawhiti, recent past, but currently working for Hopefully that's better. Cool. Thanks, Shannon. Shannon's got my back. That's the service that Rangai provides when you do your live stream. So I'll start again. Kia ora koutou. My name's Matt Cairns. I'm a former employee of Trust Tairawhiti, but I'm now working for Surf Life Saving New Zealand as their national events manager, and very proud to be based in Te Tairawhiti and being able to do that national role. And could play in the sand and then start nippers. I'll come right through the surf club here. Yeah, good, thank you. And I followed after my dad Brian, who's now 81 and been a member here since he was 14. So that's 67 years of membership. And my kids are now starting their journey with Surf Life Saving and the level 1 nippers on a Sunday morning here, which is pretty cool as well. And a little bit about our surf club journey is I was thinking a little bit, now I'm not working at the trust, but thinking about the impact that Trust Tairawhiti can have in our communities. And about 8 years ago, when Waikanae built this awesome new facility that we've got today and replaced our old one that was falling apart a wee bit, is that Trust Tairawhiti provided 140 gym next door that's well used by not only our gym members and our members, but also a lot of health initiatives that use the gym regularly. So I just thought, given we're here this evening, it's appropriate to kick off with what was probably, you know, one distribution and one amount paid to Waikanae Surf Club, but look how far that's gone in 8 years. So when I thought about coming to TMC this evening, I thought about that, and I thought, man, the leverage and the impact that one distribution can have in connected communities like that, like ours, is pretty massive. But we are here this evening for the Trust Tairawhiti annual general meeting, and we'll try and keep it moving, but it is an annual general meeting and there are formalities that need to take place. So you'll see the agenda behind me on the screen, and John Clark, Chair of the Trust, will come up shortly and work his way through that agenda, and there's an opportunity to talk about the activity of the Trust this year, also the financials, and often there's a bit of interest in those at these things, and also then moving on to the year ahead. So we'll work through those items and some others that are part of those formalities, but at the end you can see towards the end, number 10, general business, there'll be a bit of an update, and then there's an opportunity for those here this evening to ask questions and to have a chat about topics that relate to Trust Tairawhiti and or Eastland Group. We've got a really good mix, I can see in front of me this evening. Those that most of you are beneficiaries of the Trust, and I know there's people here who have maybe representing organisations that have received recent support from Trust Tairawhiti, and want to have a chat about that. and that's fantastic, and it's great to see you here. There's those of you who are probably just wanting to find out a bit more. It's a fairly not super straightforward at times when you look at the structure of the trust, its relationship with the council and its relationship with Eastland Group, and there's a bit to digest at times. So those of you who have come with questions and want to understand a bit more about how that works, you're very welcome to, and that's fantastic as well, and there'll be an opportunity to do that during general business. And there's those of you looking around the room here as well who represent organisations that have a close working relationship with the trust, and a lot of our regional leaders out there, and it's great to see you all here as well. So I guess for whatever your reason you're here this evening, you're very welcome. It's great to have you here, and once we have moved through the formalities, there'll be an opportunity to participate and engage with our chairs of both the Trust and Eastland Group, and our acting CEs who are here and happy to have a discussion. There's also an opportunity to have a light refreshment afterwards and have a chat with some of the governors and leadership and staff of both organisations afterwards for some of the more casual conversation and questions that you may have. In the event of an emergency while we're here this evening, the emergency exit down the stairwell that you came up, but also if you're towards the front of the room, behind me in the corner here is another stairwell, so you just make your way down either of those stairs, and assembly point would be at the car park just behind the surf club here. And wharipaku, for those that need to whip out during the AGM or afterwards before you leave, is just at the top of the stairs that you came up, and then turning left. So looking out this way, it's just on your right, and it's the left-hand door. The right-hand one would take you into the gym, and that might be a little bit awkward. So without further ado, I'll hand over to John Clark, Chair of Trust Tairawhiti, to move through the formalities of the annual general meeting. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Do we have to use this? Do we? Yes, we do, because we're live streaming. So, kia ora koutou, as Matt said, John Clark, Chair of Trust Tairawhiti, and so it's my pleasure on behalf of my fellow trustees and the management team at Trust Tairawhiti to welcome you along tonight to what will be, or what is, the 30th annual general meeting of Trust Tairawhiti. Taiderek ngā mihi for our karakia, and yes, go the All Blacks. There's a lot pinned on your shoulders, of course, associated with that, just to keep the morale up. So we'll continue to look. Thanks, Matt, for referencing the Waikanae Surf Club and the linkage back to the trust. I can assure you we didn't pay him to say that tonight at all. And he's not getting paid for saying it either, so that's all good. Look, he's talked about the purpose of what we're here for tonight, to review the year behind us and look forward to the year in front, and to have you as our community and as our beneficiaries to have the opportunity to engage with us as trustees or the company as well. So look, to those that are live streaming, welcome. Just so you understand, they are viewing the meeting, but they cannot participate for all sorts of reasons. They can't dial in and we can't see them, but if you are live streaming, then welcome to the meeting. Look, I'd like to introduce the trustees for starters, and I think I'll go to the far end of the table where we've got David Batten. So David is a new trustee starting with us on the 1st of July. Next to him is Rarinia Kamo, the same deal, starting on the 1st of July as well. And then coming this way, we've got Dr. Warren Williams, who's been on the trust for a couple of years. And alongside him, Warren chairs our People and Culture Committee. Wiperi Mita, next door to him, who also has been on the trust for a couple of years. Ron Aiken, who joined the trust last year, who chairs our Audit and Risk Committee. Her Worship the Mayor, or shall we say Riet, who is just here tonight as a trustee of Trust Tairawhiti. But once she's left the top table, she'll assume the hat of the Mayor, and so you can talk to her about stuff associated with the council. In the middle here is Mātanaku Mahuika, who's chair of Eastern Group, and on his left, Andrew Gaddam, who's acting CEO for Eastern Group. and next to me, Richard Searle, who's acting CEO for Trust Tairawhiti. So I should say that Ma is joined tonight by a couple of his trustees, Jim Quinn and John Nichols in the front, and the other, directors, not trustees, far more up in the status stakes as directors than trustees, should remember that. And just in terms of the other directors, so Wendy, Harvey, Hamish Bell, Debbie Birch and Candice have apologised, but I understand are on live stream as well. So while we're talking about apologies, I have two others from Dr. Jill Crisp and Matt Todd. Are there any other apologies that people want to record? Oh, Nadine from the council, CEO at the council. Anyone else? Sorry, oh, from, yep, Anapa, okay. Thank you. Any others? If not, just make sure that you have talked to our lovely ladies out there and recorded your name and whatnot, so that we can record you as having attended. So if we could move on then to the minutes of the meeting that we had on the 25th of August last year at the Lawson Field Theatre. Those minutes of that meeting have been up on the website for a week or so, 10 days. Someone like to move them being as a true record? Thank you, Michael. And Rehet, thank you. Are there any matters arising in those minutes? I don't have any. Okay, there aren't any matters arising in the minutes, so that's good. If we can then talk about the year in review, make sure that what's coming up there is what I've got, which is always pretty important. So, who's driving this cutter? Oh, it's there now, right. So look, we are guided in the course of the year, or our work rather, is led by our strategic plan. Te Aka Rātaki ki Tātou, which has 4 focus areas, obviously future generations, communities, the economic development focus around industry, business, employers, and the regional tourism promotion, or we are the regional tourism organisation. So apart from being a trust that obviously makes distributions into the community, we're also responsible as the Economic Development Agency and the Regional Tourism Organisation. And then He Rangitapu Hutahuora, which is our wellbeing framework, out on the left, expressed on the left, is what guides us in the decisions we make around distributions or direct investments in terms of making sure there's equity, sustainability and integrity, leading to wellbeing outcomes for the community at large or in groups, depending on where those funds are being distributed or invested. Our trust fund, well, the trust deed it's got 2. Yep. So we've got 2 objectives, central objectives. One, to preserve the trust capital and provide for beneficiaries, the people of Tairawhiti. So 2, preservation and provision for beneficiaries. I talked about the 30th AGM. This is the 30th anniversary of the establishment of the trust, starting as Eastland Energy Community Trust in 1993, April to be precise. So we've been going over 3 decades, and over that period of time the trust's equity has built from 20 million back in 93 to 543 million as of 31st of March 23, and a little later on I'll show how that's split up. And over those 30 odd years we've put 140 million back into the community, either by way of distributions or direct investments. So, you know, 140,000, but 140 million when you look at it across. As at the 31st of March, we had assets of 919 million, so That includes obviously the Eastern Group, because we're the 100% shareholder in there. That's 45 odd less than last year, but then we sold a network, so you would expect that asset value to fall. Liabilities also down 136 million from last year as well, given that there was debt repayment associated with the network sale, and that sits at around 375 million. So just in terms of that strong asset base that we have got is largely made possible by the investment we've got in the Eastern Group. 80% of the Trust's assets are tied up in Eastern Group, and so they provide us with a dividend stream and obviously capital growth, as you saw from the slide. So just want to acknowledge the company, its performance. You'll hear from Ma in a minute that it's been a difficult year. It's been hard work, but we've still received our dividend, and there's still been capital growth associated with that. So on that note, Ma, you might like to talk a little more about Eastern Group and a year in review.
First of all, can you hear me? Ka pai. Whenau tēnei rangi, tēnā koe he te tuakana e Derek, nā hau I whakakanohi ia ngai tāwhiri, te iwi kāinga no enei whenua, nā hau no hoki tō tātou hui hui ngai whakarite I tēnei rangi tonu. Kia tangi hi o tātou mate, ka tika, heka te maha no roto I te Tairawhiti te tau ko tahake nei. Engari ko tahi noi ho te kōrero kia rātou tukuna kia haere. Ana ka hoki mai kia tātou e huitahi nei tēnei pō tēnā tātou katoa. So acknowledging Derek as the face of Ngai Tāwhiri, the iwi kāinga of this place, and say that one more time. Well, that's who you're speaking on behalf of. If that's not the case, yeah, well, like all of us. And also greetings to all of you that are here. Derek acknowledged the passing of All Black captain Tāne Norton, who's a connection to us from Ngaitahu, and very hopeful that the All Blacks are not someone that we're mourning in a month or two's time. But thank you all for coming tonight. You'll have to forgive me, I will turn around a little bit. I do have the slides in front of me. They are in remarkably small print, and my eyes are just not good enough, but I'll try and take you through the year in review for the Eastland Group. So in terms of the overview, it's correct what John said. It's been a tough year from an operational point of view. So if you look at the numbers for the business, we recorded a profit of just over $92 million, really on the back of the sale of the network, and the uplift that we got on the amount of the sale relative to our carrying value in our accounts. But from an operating point of view, we made a loss of $6.3 million. That's comprised about $5 million odd worth of one-off items, and $1 million and a bit is operating loss. Now the reasons for that, and there are a number of them, so that the two big drivers of profitability within the Eastland Group are the port and the generation business. The port was particularly hard hit by a combination of things. Post-COVID, there were supply chain issues out of China, and the way that the port operates is it's a hub. So the port is profitable based on logs going into the port, us then charging people for the use of the port facilities and sending the logs out. Supply chains aren't working and people aren't exporting, then the port doesn't move stock and therefore it doesn't generate revenue. And on top of that, we had the various weather events that we're all very familiar with and sick and tired of, which also flow through into the port and the way the port operates. Simple fact of the matter is if roads are broken and if people aren't in forests cutting down trees, then the port doesn't operate. If I use as an example Cyclone Gabriel, immediately preceding that, port volumes had increased again to about 12,000 tonnes a day. In the immediate aftermath of Cyclone Gabriel, even once we got the port open again, we were down to 2,000 tonnes a day. And you know, with the constant weather volatility, all of that has flowed through into the port and the port's numbers for the year. On top of that, we have had some, because of the unseasonable amount of rain that we've had, we have full hydro dams, and that flows through into spot prices. And so not only does the weather stop you getting things into the port, it also affects the prices that we're able to generate for the electricity. So that combination of things led to a bit of a perfect storm. So we get the benefit of the uplift from the sale of the network, but from an operating point of view, the business made a loss. The $5 million odd worth of other one-off items that we report and that contributed to the $6.3 million loss that we record from an operating point of view is because we took the opportunity of the port sale, of the network sale, to essentially do some cleaning up in our balance sheet. So there are items there that we were carrying, and a transaction is a good time to clear those items out so they don't have a negative effect on your overall profitability. So there were things like there was an exploratory well that we were carrying in our books, and we decided to write off the value of that and do some of those other cleanups. So that's the combination of things that have led to the year. So the overall profit number is a good number, and as a positive number, it means that actually the carrying value of that network asset was much higher than we had in our books. It means we executed a good sale in order to get the price that we got for it, and then be able to bring through the benefit of the profit on that sale from an operating point of view. And that's the sort of the recurring thing. Not such a good year, and still a lot of work to do. Things have improved in the current year. We are in black numbers in terms of operations as it currently stands. Not really helped by the weather volatility, but still getting reasonable port volumes, and the wholesale pricing on the electricity has improved. But we can't hide from the fact that there's still challenging operating conditions that we're continuing to work in, especially around the port and with all of the different weather events, issues with roads and those sorts of things. So not sure what that will mean for the balance of the year. We're projecting that it will still be a profitable year, but it won't be as profitable as we would like it to be, given the amount that we have invested in those assets. Beyond that, someone's just stolen my thunder on the rest of it. So I do need to do a shout out to the staff at the Eastland Group. So in the immediate aftermath of Cyclone Gabriel in particular, but also through the other weather events that we've had. So we own the network up to the 31st of March. And I can't speak highly enough about the people in the network and the work that they did to keep the community connected. Whereas Hawke's Bay were without power for weeks, we had about an 8 or 9 hour outage, which was actually connected to the substation in Hawke's Bay being flooded. And we had things like people spending the night before the storm in shearers' quarters so that they could get to lines that we thought might be down as a consequence of the storm event. So you do have to acknowledge people in times like that, because the lights go on or they go off for us, but actually there are a bunch of people that sit behind that who are working in often difficult conditions to make sure that happens. And so it's important that we acknowledge that. And on top of that, the port was closed, but the port staff still turned up to work, and instead of doing their normal jobs, they were going out helping with clearing debris, doing all of those other sorts of things. So I'm very proud of the way that the team at Eastland rolled their sleeves up and made a big effort to try and help and support the community through that stage. It's not something that appears in the P&L. It's not something that is part of their normal job description, at least insofar as the port people are concerned. But nevertheless, it's it's a testament to the quality of the people that were there in those businesses. So we sold the network for $257 million. I did the regulated asset base, which is what the charging is done on, was like about $190 million. Our carrying value was lower than that in terms of our accounts. So what we can charge for as a regulated asset base is different to the carrying value in our accounts. And the difference between that sale price and the carrying value is where you get the $99 million profit on the sale. Okay, now we can swap and I'll move faster. So I've gone through all of those numbers, a profit of $92 million, not forgetting the $6.3 million operating loss. We distributed $90 million to the trust. That was comprised $10 million, which is our normal annual dividend, a $50 million special dividend, which followed the sale of the network, and the repayment of the capital notes, which was a further $30 million. The port did 2.4 million tonnes of cargo, which, I mean, still seems like a lot. We forecast 2.7 million tonnes, but actually prior to last year, we were doing closer to 3 million tonnes of logs going through the port. So that's a big difference between the 2.4 million that we did last year and the 3 million which we would ordinarily be looking to do in normal conditions. We had a record for the number of passengers through the airport, 210,000, possibly assisted by the roads being up. And the generation business generated 416.6 gigawatt hours of renewable energy. So there is still planning happening for the future. Eastland Generation, and you'll be aware that there is a capital raise that we are currently undertaking in relation to that business. When we did the sale of the network and we talked about these things in the public, we pointed to a pipeline of $500 or $600 million odd worth of projects, generation projects. So we're looking to bring someone in to assist in funding that pipeline of projects. We recently announced the commencement of the top 2 geothermal power plant on the Kawerau field. So we already own the top 1 geothermal field, which is about 25 odd megawatts. And we have a fuel supply agreement with Ngāti Tuwharetua Geothermal Assets, who have preferential rights to take geothermal fluid off that field. We've now done a further deal with them around top 2, which is it'll be between 49 and 50 odd megawatt power station that will be built by Ormat over the next couple of years or so. We also are have a development agreement with Tairawhiti, which is at Lake Rotoiti, for a further geothermal project there. And we have the Tihi o Te Rā, which is at the airport, which is the sort of 5 to 8 megawatt solar farm. And there are 2 other solar farms and possibly a wind farm in region that are also part of that, that grouping of projects that we're looking at. One in Tolaga, one in Wairoa, and the wind farm is sort of in the area around Turihaua. In terms of Eastland Port, the Wharf 7 rebuild is largely finished, and credit to Andrew and the people that have been doing the work there. Looks like being on time and within budget, which is fantastic and not usually what you expect of significant engineering projects. There is a consenting process for a second berth, and we saw something of the importance of the port to the region during the period immediately after the cyclone, when I think we did 34 trips carrying cargo to and from the region when the roads were out. And one of the things that flows from the sale of the network is the restructure of the head office. The head office at the Eastland Group has been slimmed down, and with the sale of the network, the nature of the Eastland Group is likely to change over time. There is a process occurring. I don't want to preempt that process, but bringing another shareholder into the generation business, that inevitably means that the way that the Eastland Group and its head office looks will change. So here's this. I don't know how well you can see that. This is something of the journey. So it goes back to 2003, prior to when it was only the network, the purchase of the port, the leasing of Gisborne Airport, the purchase of GDL, which is a geothermal plant in Kawerau, which was the first of those geothermal plants that Eastland Group purchased. The commissioning of the Te Ahia Maui geothermal plant, which is another 25 odd megawatt plant in Kawerau. The development project around Tāheke, the opening of the new airport terminal, the purchase of Top 1 and the Top 2 development rights. Then we have the sale of the network and the commencement of Top 2, and now raising further capital to try and continue to grow the generation business. The purpose of the company, or at least our view of the purpose of the company, initially was a regional infrastructure owner and operator. Increasingly, as the region is looking for capital to invest in local activities, as the trust is looking for capital to support the different projects that it supports, is looking to ways that we can continue to grow, continue to increase the revenues that we're able to generate, to turn into distributions back to the trust to support the things that it wishes to do. And that's very much behind the sorts of things that we're trying to do around growing the generation portfolio, and was also one of the reasons behind the sale of the network. So, this is the bit where we just say, haven't we done a great job? So the total value that the company has created for shareholders over time is $549 million, which is made up of a combination of distributions and also growth in the underlying capital value of the assets that the company holds. It's distributed $211 million so far to the trust for it to invest and for it to use in relation to its activities. If you like numbers, it's a 13.34% compound annual growth rate on the assets that were originally acquired when the company was set up, when it started off, and you can see in the bottom right hand corner with $49 million of equity and $100 million worth of assets. Not sure who's in charge of the slide, but I finished that one. Just no. Is that me? Am I done? Okay. Look, there was one thing I was going to do rather than leave it for general business. There were a couple of questions that arose. One was in relation to the Flick investment, and it was sent in. So Flick is a retail business, and there are 2 or 3 of them in the market, possibly more now, where what they do is they essentially try and offer a model to, or they have offered a model to customers like us, which basically enables you to buy your electricity at the spot price. So it works really well if the spot price is low, doesn't work so well if the spot price is high. Those various businesses have evolved over time, and Flick was seen by the Eastland Group at the time that it bought into that business in about 2017 as a way of looking to explore how it might have a retail offering to go alongside the generation that it's producing. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it nets out that it was sold in the last financial year. We book a profit for that sale in the financial year, but actually over the life of that investment we made about an $8 million loss on it. About $8 million is my loss in relation to that. So the question got asked, and that's the number. Don't have the precise numbers, but that's the order of magnitude of it. The second question that was raised by, and I don't know who it was raised by, was about the salary bands, noting the increase in the salary bands from last year, because of course we disclose how many employees we have in different salary bands as part of our annual report. And the question was, does that relate to the sale of the network? The answer to that question is no. The answer to the question is no. No. No, it doesn't relate. The sale of the network is not something that contributed to those earnings. So the things that contributed to that number were, the things that contributed to that is that this is the first financial year in respect of which we start to recognise the long-term incentive scheme. So we make a payment against that 5-year scheme after year 3. So they have come through in terms of the salary numbers. The other things that have come through is that we've had some redundancy costs in the last year. We also had some retention and other related payments associated with the network. So there is a combination of things which have contributed to those numbers. But they are not numbers that relate to the sale of the network, because to the extent that they may come through in the long-term incentive scheme, that would happen in subsequent income years. Looking at the chair of the audit committee, and he's told me that I got that right. Look, beyond that, you know that and I've said this previously, we disclose the numbers around what people are made. We consider that we're required to do that. We understand that people are being paid well relative to a lot of our community. A lot of the staff we have are experienced and they have been there for a long time. We go through a benchmarking exercise in terms of what we pay people. But as I've said previously, beyond the disclosure, beyond you knowing the figures, you may have some questions in relation to that, but I am not going to have a discussion about sort of individual people's earnings and what they're making. Those are all private employment matters. So from my point of view, we've made the disclosure, you know what they are. I'm not arguing about how you may or may not feel about that, but beyond that, these are private matters and I'm just not entitled to and won't discuss those matters. So I think that is all of the questions that I could remember. Thank you very much for listening to me. I probably talked longer than I needed to. Tēnā tātou katoa.
Thanks, Ma. Look, I just want to go back to the network sale that Ma referred to. So for a number of years now, the Trust's been looking to have investment diversity and improve liquidity. So working through that transaction has been extremely important to meet those aspirations of the Trust. So we've talked about the network sale and the 80 million that was returned to the Trust by way of the repayment of the capital notes and a special dividend of 50 mil, and that's obviously gone into immediate investments, predominantly, in fact, all in a cash sense, to provide some diversity in the first instance, but also increases the available cash that the Trust has, and the capital allocation accordingly has changed. So when I talked before about the 543 million, you can see it up there split out into what is available cash, which is a bit short of 100 mil. We've got a reserve that we keep of 25 million and don't go below that. Well, no, we're never going to go below that. That's ring-fenced, essentially, pardon the pun, for the rainy day, or at a time when perhaps the company, for whatever reason, was unable to pay a dividend. Thankfully, that hasn't happened to this stage, and presumably it won't for a while. And then the rest is tied up in long-term infrastructure. So you've got that growth going through, and the capital allocation on the side there, the 281 million going into the capital reserve that the trust holds as well as preserved capital. So that just gives you a little bit of a split. We've talked, and if we haven't, we're about to, the fact that we have invested 30 million in capital notes to support that top 2 project. And I know there's questions around, so you got 30 out and you put 30 back. Well, we didn't actually take that 30 out and put it in a special bucket on its own and then pick it up again. It just so happened that the numbers were the same, and that 30 million of capital notes that went into top 2 was was the result of a really rigorous process that the trust undertook to make sure that that investment was appropriate for us as trustees. And obviously, yes, it's earning interest, and the interest rate is relative to any risk, and it's there until such time as the capital raise comes to fruition, and then it's repaid back to the trust. So the dilution of shareholding in that generation, coupled with the sale of the network, just allows us to do a lot more in the community, and we'll come to that a bit later in the evening as to how we respond to some of that discussion last year about, so what are you going to do with 80 million? How are you going to do more in the community? So we can talk about that shortly. But just to carry on with this theme of the year in review, I'll hand over to Richard, and he can go through some of the operational updates that occurred through the course of the year.
Thank you, John. Tēnā koutou o tira, tēnei tātou katoa. Nō ko anō te mihi, kia koutou, tēnei pō, te hei Māori ora. As the Regional Economic Development Agency, one of the Trust's key priorities is supporting regional businesses and industries to thrive. Over the year, we worked with over 170 businesses through the government's Regional Business Partner Network and Callaghan Innovation. Through these incentives, we help businesses with capability training, funding, opportunities, and research and development. We also partnered with the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment on the Digital Boost pilot program, and worked with local service providers to deliver digital training to 89 businesses across the region. I'd like to acknowledge the small businesses around Te Tairawhiti for their innovation and dedication to improving their operations, and it goes a long way to strengthening our economy. One of the more significant areas of work for the economic development team this year came after Cyclone Gabrielle. The Trust had a key role in leading the region's immediate business response and broader economic recovery. We immediately set up a business hub with a Starlink that we were able to get a hold of. They were a scarce supply at the time. Acknowledge Ngāti Porou for that. That enabled businesses to get online, to pay their staff, to pay their creditors, and to access the support they needed from government agencies. We had over 300 businesses came through the hub during the early days of the cyclone, which helped us understand what support was required. We also surveyed local businesses and sectors to quantify their losses, and we provided that data back to government to aid their response. We're grateful to government, particularly our MP at the time, Kiritapu Allen, who was responsive and went into bat for Tairawhiti. The Trust was one of 7 agencies tasked with delivering the government's business grants support recovery package to flood-affected regions across the North Island. Over the 8 weeks, we distributed $16.3 million to, I think, 730 local businesses to help them get back up and running through some very tough times. It was a big undertaking, in fact, a massive undertaking, to stand up the application process, to get the information out there to businesses as to how to apply. And I'm really proud of how hard the team worked to get the money out to businesses in their time of need. Over the last few years, we've made significant investments in local wood processing at the prime site at Dunstan Road, aiming to maximise direct and flow-on benefits to the region. 2 major projects were completed with a total capital expenditure of 23 million through the course of the year, with over 50% of the funding supported by Kānoa, the Regional Economic Development and Investment Unit. The 2 projects include the installation of a new state-of-the-art equipment to modernise the sawmill manufacturing process at Kiwi Lumber, and a new building to house a second manufacturing line that will increase production for wood engineering technology. The intent behind this investment is to reduce the region's reliance on international log markets and to increase the supply of high-value wood products into the local construction market, and particularly our homes. Since the Trust bought the Prime site a few years back now, it's gone from 0 jobs, it wasn't doing anything, to over 80 full-time employees currently, and that number will climb to over 100 in the coming year. Tourism is another sector in Tairawhiti with huge growth potential and job prospects. After a shaky few years post-COVID, we were pleased to welcome cruise ships and international visitors back to the region late last year. The last cruise season brought about 14,000 visitors on 18 ships between October and March. As a regional tourism office and organisation, we will continue to focus on the destination development and marketing, showcasing our unique attractions, our people and our place. I'm pleased to say that the Trust also distributed 4.39 million to 68 community groups over the year for projects and initiatives that supported regional wellbeing. I'll highlight just a few of the initiatives that the Trust has supported. First one is Swim for Life Tairawhiti. This impactful program aims to address the decline in children's swimming ability by providing lessons to schools across the region. Last year, more than 3,000 kids went through the program, receiving about 10 lessons each to help improve their water competency. The lessons are held during school time, which takes the pressure off parents and helps remove barriers to participation. The Trust supported Swim for Life Tairawhiti with $90,000 over 3 years. Heading Up High Charitable Trust takes an inclusive, knowledge-based approach to healthy living, enabling their vision for whānau to live healthier and longer. The purpose is to support whānau from dying too young due to complications of type 2 diabetes, and to provide them with the support and self-manage their health through sustainable lifestyle choices, including diet and exercise programs in a community setting. Hiringapai received just over $83,000 last year towards their activities and their operational costs. The Gisborne Board Riders Club East Coast Surfing Initiative is not just about catching waves, but about connecting whānau to the taia and the moana through surfing. The club received $120,000 from the Trust towards this project, enabling them to install containers at Tokomaru Bay, Waipiro Bay and Wharekāhika, with equipment to provide the surfing programs for those communities. And lastly, as part of the Trust cyclone response, our board agreed to make just over $370,000 available for an immediate community relief fund. We partnered with the Department of Internal Affairs on the initiative. They made a contribution, as well as the Gift Trust and the Clear Foundation, and supported 49 community groups with quick turnaround grants to help their recovery efforts. So that wraps up our high-level overview from some of our mahi over the last year. I'll now hand it back to John to continue. Sure. Yes. Oh, that's a good question. If you look at Statistics New Zealand, the numbers are something in the order of 5,000, but we know that a good proportion of those are like shell companies and the like. So we think active businesses in region probably in the order of 1,800. So roughly 50%, and acknowledging that not all businesses were affected by the cyclone. Ka te rā, mō tēnei wā, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Kia ora.
And just to add to that question, so if you were a business, a farming business that had accessed MPI money, then you weren't eligible to apply for the funding that Trust Tairawhiti was administering through Ministry of Business and Innovation and Employment. So not sure how many rural businesses we've got, you'll know that, but they were, you know, they're part of that as well. So look, I just, in terms of what Richard talked about in that space, assisting businesses and whatnot, particularly the economic development team and Nadine and her community team really stepped up straight away after that, set up that hub in Shed 3, which, as Richard said, gave businesses an opportunity to get communications, be that just at a personal level or more particularly to pay staff and pay bills and all those sorts of things. So Starlinks became the new norm. And for goodness sake, if you've got one and you just put it back in the shed, think about that, because you might need it again. They don't go too well, I don't think, if they've been sitting in the shed for a while. Look, there's been some changes at the Trust over the last year. I just want to acknowledge Gavin Murphy, who resigned as our Chief Executive back at the end of June this year. Gav guided the Trust through the amalgamation of the Economic Development Agency and regional tourism organisations, the subsequent rebrand to Trust Tairawhiti, as well as the introduction of He Rangitapu He Tohuora, the latter a piece of work that spanned, I think, probably 2.5 to 3 years, if I think about when we first started on that journey. So significant piece of work in itself. That's really the hallmark of the Trust and is viewed by other trusts and others outside of Gisborne as being something that's quite unique. But he also brought to Trust Tairawhiti his knowledge that he had gained, particularly in the geothermal space, during his 13-odd years with Eastern Group Limited. So Gav's gone to do other things and spend time with his family, and is currently away skiing. We also farewelled a couple of our trustees, in Dr. Jill Crisp and Kristen Koheri-Suter, at the end of June. Jill had been a trustee for 6 years, had an important role as chair of our People and Culture Committee. She brought many skills to the board table, drawing on her background in social science and strategic leadership. Kristen's been a passionate trustee with a strategic approach to challenging the status quo and ensuring the Trust responds to the community's needs. Her financial nous and extensive governance experience has been invaluable to Trust deliberations over the period of time. So we wish Gavin and Jill and Kristen all the best in their next chapters. I'd also just like to acknowledge my fellow trustees and thank them for their efforts over the last 12 months. Some of them have come on at a latter stage when things have been happening within the Trust and had to pick up a whole lot of information. They were appointed at the end of June and had their first meeting about the 20th of July or something. So had limited time to pack it all in, but we certainly welcome Rawinia and David, both of whom have whakapapa links back to this region and already keeping us on our toes. So together we're all working towards achieving our vision to benefit the people of Te Tairawhiti. So on that note, if we can just look to the year ahead and go back to some of the motions that we need to talk about. So just in terms of our statement of intent, and so that has been available. Phil, remind me. No. It's been online for a while anyway, but the statement of intent, that I have no intentions of reading that because I can't read it from here anyway, and I don't expect you to because you haven't got a hope in hell. But there are copies of the strategic statement of intent rather out at the back, and if you haven't got one, please pick one up on the way out. Take it home, read it. It tells you what the Trust's plans are for the coming 12 months. I'd have to say that because we are required to give it to the council by the end of January, February, whatever, for them to respond and do all those sorts of things. But given the events of the 14th of February, we did take the opportunity, once it came back from the council, to add some other stuff in there around how we were going to respond and deal with some of the issues that arose out of Gabriel. So it was, in a sense, modified a little bit from the original, all for the right reasons. All right, so if we can just return to the purposes of an annual general meeting and the mechanical stuff associated with that. We do have financial statements and an annual report. There is a question around those. They're up on the website on the 28th of July. Again, there are hard copies of those out there. The motion that we need in relation to that is that the Trust Tairawhiti consolidated financial statements and annual report for the year ended 31st of March be received and noted. And in terms of the financial statements, just to be clear, our auditors are with us tonight, the group and the Trust auditors in Brett and Hasnan. Thank you for taking the time to come across, meet with trustees this afternoon and be here tonight. So those financial statements, if someone's prepared to move, please, and the annual report. Shannon, way down the back. Tina, sorry. Any questions, queries? I do have another question, I think, in general business, but I'll deal with that, Colin, then. All right, if there's no further discussion, I'll put that. All in favour? No, carried. The appointment of the auditor. So the proposed motion is, having noted that the Auditor General has appointed Deloitte as the auditor to the Gisborne Airport and Eastern Group has appointed Deloitte as their auditor, in the interest of efficiency and cost effectiveness, beneficiaries should reappoint Deloitte as Trust Tairawhiti's auditor for the period from the conclusion of this annual meeting to the conclusion of the next annual meeting. And for those of you that have checked up, that's exactly the same resolution as was passed last year with the deletion of reference to the network. So do I have a mover? Thank you, Ron and Alice. Any queries? No, I'll put that. All in favour? No, carried. And the auditor's fees, the remuneration of the auditor of Trust Tairawhiti for the period from the conclusion of the annual meeting until the conclusion of the next annual meeting be fixed by trustees. Thank you, Joe. Thanks, Lyle. Seconder. Any? Sorry? You're Joe and Lyle. Yeah. Did I? I was just checking to make sure you were listening, you see, and you were. I didn't want you to suddenly fall asleep after doing your presentation and thinking you were off the hook. That's all right, I've got it. Now you're bugging me up completely. I'll put that. All in favour? No, carried. And then the statement of intent that I referred to, that the statement of intent for the 23-24 year be received and noted. Someone like to have a go at that one? Thank you, Karan. Thanks, Moira. Any queries there? As I say, take it home with you, read it, it's lovely bedtime reading, and then you can come along next year and see whether we did what we said we were going to do. Right, so just moving forward to general business, and just to start the general business, towards the end of last year, start of this year, the Trust began a strategic review, refresh of our strategy, just to ensure that those strategic focuses aligned with the way in which the community and the economy is evolving in Tairawhiti. Obviously, it got a bit interrupted and hijacked from February through till probably the end of April, May, until we picked it up again. But we just wanted to make sure that while some of the focuses that we've got may well have shifted, that the vision that we have for our people, our whānau and our communities of Tairawhiti to live the lives we value in ways that matter to us were actually still the same. So the point the trustees are at is this is an evolving process. So what I share with you shortly is part of an evolving process. But the piece that is cast in, if you like, tablets of stone, are those issues around our vision, te mana, our shared pride, te ihi, our shared prosperity, te wehi, our shared opportunity, which haven't changed. So the Trust confirmed that they were still relevant for us as an organisation. Following the network sale, and you know, questions were asked in this regard last year, the Trust is obviously better positioned to be able to invest more in communities and economic development. And so we signalled at our AGM in 2021 that we'd like to continue to invest in community facilities that are needed and are to be well used. And that was really in response to that community facilities strategy that was undertaken over a couple of years with the Council, the Trust and Sport Gisborne Tairawhiti. We funded the skate park and the pump track. They're great examples of this, and we're now looking towards some other quick win community type facility projects, innovative ones particularly, that will lead to meaningful impacts for Tairawhiti. So I just want to share a couple of those with you tonight. The first of those being the Victoria Hub. So we committed to resurface the netball courts as part of those initial quick win projects. That project has developed into something much bigger and much more exciting from the community's perspective. There's a newly formed governance group for the hub, and they've been working really hard behind the scenes on planning for a new multi-use facility that aims to bring several codes onto one site. If you want to have a chat with that, Moira, who's chairman of that, chairperson rather, of that governance group, is here tonight. Matt referred to it earlier, you know, construction costs, R&M, all those things are starting to get out of reach, if you like, of some of those smaller sporting codes. And shared facilities are obviously a smart solution to try and, you know, pull those people together and get better value for our dollars. So yes, we've committed to the resurfacing, but when you start to do those things and as it develops, there's a whole lot of geotech and stuff that you do around that, and it gives you the opportunity to say, well, hang about, we just need to think about what happens in this phase 2, so that if the Trust were to continue to support something down there, you don't have to pull something down to achieve something else, or worse still, get involved in something that you could have sorted out much earlier. The worst thing is digging up a road that you've only just fixed, isn't it, Riet? Well, you haven't fixed it in the first place, so you can't dig it up. All right. Oh, look, you just needed livening up. You know, she's had a big day today. She's had a big council meeting today. And in that regard, huge digression, but just to acknowledge Dave Wilson, who finishes with you on Friday, with whom Trust Tairawhiti's had a great association with. So, you know, Dave was responsible for all sorts of things, from civil defence controller to roads, water supplies and all those things, but we wish him well in his new opportunity. The other one that we're interested in looking further at is Whareora. Hikarangi Enterprises, their project is essentially a lease or a rent-to-own, lease-to-own, if you like, providing locally built, healthy, affordable housing solutions for whānau. So these houses are sold to people at the cost of, very close to the cost of the building price. Significant, obviously, reduction in the cost for low-income whānau. So Hikurangi Enterprises is partnering with Community Finance to develop a financing model for progressive home ownership. Their aim is to create a scalable and replicable housing model that develops capacity for local housing resiliency for whānau and Tairawhiti. And as you can see from the illustration there, there's a whole ecosystem, circular economy associated with this, ending up in construction for home ownership. So a number of community organisations are looking, particularly philanthropic ones, are looking to get involved in this as well. And I'm not quite sure where it's at, Richard, but an information memorandum, and so management's doing a whole lot of work for us behind the scenes, and hopefully we reach some conclusions on that. The other one is the Mātai campus. Illustration there for you. So Mātai Medical Research Institute's a medical imaging research and innovation centre, and you'll have seen their first building going up down in Childers Road. The Trust's been working with Mātai on the campus development that will house a state-of-the-art imaging facility, medical research spaces, classrooms, lecture halls, study areas, as well as on-site accommodation. The campus does have enormous potential to be a future foundation for the technology, education, job opportunities, and improved community health outcomes. So if you've been following Mātai and you think about the things they're involved in, the Trust supported them in the very early stages of their development. They're up at the hospital with their state-of-the-art imaging machine, but always wanted something of their own, so acquired the site in Childers Road 12 months or so ago. That is the first part of it, but if you think of that in the context of wood processing, we always did the wood processing. We wanted a wood processing hub, if you like, or centre of excellence for wood processing. This could be possibly a centre of excellence for health and health outcomes and research in Tairawhiti. And just bear in mind that, you know, a lot of the people that support this come from out of town. This sort of stuff could be done just as easily in Auckland or somewhere else. So to have it here is great in that sense. So that's just a bit of a flavour. There are other opportunities that sit there if we bundled them all up. All the things that we know exist, all the aspirations of groups and people in the community, we end up at around 900 odd million. So, you know, that's not an expectation that the Trust funds all that, but it gives you some sense of what sits out there that people aspire to have in this region. So if we can help in some small way, we will, but it won't be at 900 million, otherwise we'll need to sell the company and that'll be the end of it, everything. So that's just a bit of a flavour for it. Hopefully that was useful for you. So look, we've got some, I'll go back to you, Matt, but we've got, just for other general business, but we do have another couple of questions that were floating around, which Colin asked, so I'll just, the first one I did answer around when the annual reports and whatnot were available, 28th of July, and then Colin asked a question in relation to the loans that appear in the accounts, one to Rangai Limited and one to Toru Tairawhiti Limited. Shannon Dowsing's a trustee of Rangai Limited. Kristen Kohiri-Suter was a trustee of Toru Tairawhiti Limited. And the question was in relation to, are these loans interest-free and is there a repayment schedule? The loans are not interest-free, so there's obviously interest charged to it, and both of those loan agreements have provisions for repayment, including their schedule of principal repayments. So they are loans to both of those organisations over that period of time. And just to be very clear, yes, there are a couple of trustees associated with that, but our dealing with those sorts of things are really robust, you can be assured. The other question was in relation to the sale of the network and around the loan of 30 million. If I didn't say it before, it's reinvested there at a return of 10%. So the interest rate on that is 10% coupon rate. And it's just a reflection of the rate that applies to the geothermal energy business. And obviously has a risk factor built into that, Colin. And then the other question was in relation to the other 50 mil and the suggestion that recent events have brought a huge economic strain on the area's infrastructure and also to residents financially, both business and personal. Have the trustees considered a major contribution to the Cyclone Recovery Fund and GDC to assist as many persons as possible affected and assist GDC to temper rate increases forced by these events? Look, the quantum of funding requested for the region's cyclone recovery is way beyond the trust ability to fund. The recovery plan has gone in. The numbers in there are eye-watering. And coupled with that, I mean, the trust's not responsible for funding local and central government activities, but we do continue to work on community and economic development that will assist the region's recovery. So short answer is no, we haven't considered making a lump sum donation to whatever. For it to be effective, it would need to be huge, and it would leave us with no opportunity then to do other things out in the community. So we're certainly not in the business of funding the government's responsibilities for them. So look, on that note, I'll give you back to Matt, and he's going to, if there are other questions, Matt can direct them wherever as appropriate.
Great, thanks, John. And you can take a seat for now. So thanks, John, Ma, and Rich for your presentations. As mentioned at the start, there are a number of formalities that the AGM needs to go through as the agenda and the process for this AGM. But now we've come to the time for questions and any comments or discussion that our beneficiaries may have. So what I would like to do is open up the floor now. Christine, I believe, has a mic that we encourage you to use, please, because as John mentioned earlier, this AGM is being live streamed, and so those that are listening online can hear as well. Please use the microphone. I'd that you raise your hand if you do have a question. Christine will then bring the mic to you. And before you ask your question or make your statement or comment, please state your name as well, because for the AGM we need to make sure that we're clear on the minutes as well. So that would just help those doing the minutes to be able to get an accurate record of the meeting. So that would be much appreciated. So, and I'm just going to help facilitate this. I'm not going to answer any questions, but I will direct you to those that you've heard from already who might be best placed to answer your question. So we've got John Clark as chair of the trust and Richard Schill as acting CEO of the trust. They will answer questions in relation to Trust Tairawhiti, and would also like to thank Ma and as chair of Eastland Group and Andrew Gaddam as acting CEO of Eastland Group to answer any questions that are more down the line of Eastland Group. Well, there may be some that's a combination of the two, and these guys can work it out. So, do we have any questions? Great, we've got Andy first. Christine, just a couple of rows behind you.
Kia ora, Andy Cranston, District Councillor. Questions probably to the group, possibly Andrew. If the network sale hadn't gone through, I think we'd be sitting around shuffling our chairs a bit more than we were. The reality that was put in front of us was that the difficulty with the port has been the market, which is China. How reliable is the group on its profitability being at the whim of China? And if it is at that whim, what can be done about it?
Kia ora, Andy. Look, it is a known issue, and it has been an issue for really the duration of the life of the port, that it's a single product, single market port. Some of the investment that we have made in Wharf 7 and also the twin berth, so doing Wharf 8, is aimed to create a more diverse port structure so we can perhaps shift different products across that port. And the Cyclone Gabriel gave us an opportunity to trial the coastal shipping of produce out of the region, and to see whether or not there might be an alternative to the logs that we put through there. That wasn't overly successful. What we learned about that was that that smaller ship probably isn't going to work because of the cost of it relative to what we're able to generate in terms of returns. And so there is, I think, a need, and the exposure has been highlighted by the last 12 months, but it's always been there, to accelerate thinking about what we do in relation to the port. The port is an important regional asset. It's quite complicated to do things with, because there's a big piece of land there that also, there are various parts of our community have interests or connections to. So all of those are things that we would have to work through if we do anything with the port. But you are right that we do have an exposure to it that has been highlighted, and it is a piece of work that's currently underway, but it's not, there's not a quick fix to that, because the port is what it is. It's a hub, and it's dependent on the economic activity that occurs within the region and the willingness of the people who are producing things in this region to use the port as an outlet for the products they produce, as opposed to putting it into a truck and sending it on road somewhere, which is really the primary other method by which people ship things out of this region.
Thanks, Ma, and thanks for your question, Andy. And I believe Colin was next. Christine?
Colin. Trust to part. However, decision of cash cow. Information. Forestry industry is about to go belly up anyway, and we back. That aside, my question is going to be to all directors and trustees, both companies. You are charged with looking after our funds. We have no ability, the people of Brisbane have no ability to control any aspect of that spend or the direction that that spend goes in. You guys are totally in charge of that decision. You see in this report, just one very graphic picture here, which is some aeroplanes doing reckless flying. I think that's describing the management of EG. And then we have had that reckless behaviour with our funds, and it's been rewarded with this table where last year one person got paid more than $500,000. This year 6 of them paid more than $500,000, and the top pay gets an additional $400,000. That is what the people, an individual in the city would dream of winning in Lotto, and it's given out in addition to an exceptionally good salary. So my question here is, with good information, you can make good decisions. Do any of you trust the directors feel you have been given bad information? And if so, are you going to do anything about it?
Thanks, Colin.
Colin, the first thing I'd say in relation to the sale of the network, so that the network, as I said when we did the various consultation rounds, had not been cash flow positive. So it's inaccurate to describe it as a cash cow. It's a regulated business that produces a return which is essentially prescribed by central government or arms thereof. And through the sale of the network, we were able to pay $80 million to the trust. even if you assume that we were generating $1 million, maybe $2 million worth of dividends per annum on that business, that $80 million is equivalent to 20, 30, maybe more years of dividend that that business would have thrown off. So I disagree that it was a cash cow. The fact that we were able to generate $100 million worth of profit from the sale, and even if we use the rateable, the regulated asset base, which was about $190 million at the point of sale, so $70 million above that number, actually says to me that our capital was tied up in a place that wasn't a sensible place for the region to have its capital tied up, because we had all of that money tied up in a business that wasn't generating sufficient revenues to pay dividends and to make distributions back to the trust. And what we did by selling that business, because it's a regulated business, the buyer of the business has to continue to provide the network services to the region, but the region then gets the benefit of that capital that was locked up in that business to invest. So even with the $30 million that the trustees have given back to us at the extortionate rate of 10%, the trust has $60 million, $50 million of that coming from the sale of that business, which it would have waited years to get by way of dividends from that network business. So we consider that in terms of what's the best use of regional capital, we are strongly of the view that that was the best use of that. Now I acknowledge, and Andy is right to have raised the issues with the port, that is a trickier asset to deal with because it's not regulated, because if we were to sell that, we would have to be mindful of the fact that there are various groups within our community that have strong interest in that area and in the land that's under it. It's not a straightforward transaction for us to undertake. We do have risk from a region's point of view as to what might happen to that port facility following the sale, and we saw the importance of the port following the cyclone. So while it's primarily a forestry port, actually you can look at it as being a sort of a point of exit for products from this region to other places, and an important regional facility, something we therefore need to be really careful about thinking about. Now that's not to disagree with your comment about the challenges with it, about the need for us to do something about it. I think that you are very right to make that observation, but it is something that we have to do, but will take a lot longer. And so in terms of releasing capital, for the reasons I gave, that we believe the sale of the network was the right thing to do. In terms of the income, look, I'm happy to note the comment. I don't think it's appropriate for me to be discussing people's individual earnings here. As I said in answer to Colin, there are a combination of things that have led to that uplift. So it's not an uplift in base, there is a long-term incentive scheme. One of the terms of the scheme was that at the end of year 3, there was a payment made in relation to that. There were a number of participants in that scheme who were restructured or who were affected by the restructure of the head office. And there were some redundancies that occurred within the year. We carry all of those numbers through into the earnings numbers. And if we do the capital raise, then some things will continue to happen within that business. And I appreciate, there are people in that business that get paid a lot. I also have to acknowledge, though, that with the sale of the network, with the other things that are happening, it's really uncertain too for a lot of people that work within the business, because there are restructurings and people can see what the future looks like. It wasn't an easy process for the people in the network, knowing that they would have a different owner, but they still got on trucks and went up the coast and made sure that there were lines connected in the middle of the cyclone. So we consider that we get good information. We have a pretty robust board. We have John and Jim here. We have Candice and Debbie and Wendy and Hamish online. And I'm the chair, come referee of that grouping of people. And I can assure you that the directors do, I think, a good job. They're connected to different regions and they're conscious about trying to do the best thing, not just for the business, but for this region. Kia ora.
Shared responsibility, is it? So look, a couple of things, and I don't know where Grace is, but I think it was page 16 where there were two circles which talked about the capital allocation and the like. So look, and I don't want to give people a lecture, but it's on this because it's complicated. But there are two classes of beneficiary: an income and a capital beneficiary, or a residual beneficiary, which is the council in 2073. And we did a whole lot of work around that, instigated by Lyle, believe it or not, who suggested that the way in which we were doing that wasn't correct, that there was too much being allocated in a residual capacity, and that income beneficiaries, i.e. those of today, had not been missing out, but had capital that could have been allocated to them the other way. So we've moved to repurpose that. But I said when I was talking about those two slides, and I'll say it again, as trustees, we've got a fiduciary duty to preserve the capital of that trust. We can't, when you're 100% shareholder, and this is prior to the network sale, of an asset approaching $1 billion, and you're totally exposed to that, then you've got to think about that from the point of view of the diversity associated with that investment, but also the liquidity that you can get out of it to enable you to do stuff for those income beneficiaries, because a lot of what they're entitled to, for want of a better expression, is tied up in assets that are illiquid. So selling the network, whether you liked it or not, and Mars talked about its cash positivity, negativity, whichever way you want to look, it wasn't the cash cow that people talked about. Are the lights still going? Yes, they are. Can we continue to look back on that? Well, we can, but why should we when we need to be looking forward? So one of the aspirations that this trust has got, and the trustees have, is that, so we have some capital that we have available to us, but we are absolutely desperate to make sure that the other entities in this community put their capital alongside our capital so we can actually leverage off each other and achieve something that's a hell of a lot better than what we've got now. And I'm talking about the likes of the GHL's Eastern Group in their residual form. There are iwi balance sheets sitting out there that are desperate to get involved in other investments other than the ones they've traditionally got. And I think that's where we need to be focusing. GHL's in a bit of a pickle at the moment. So while you poke a bone at us, that dividend that you were going to get, you're not going to get. And you should have been aware of that, because there's a whole lot of others out there post the 14th of February that aren't paying much at all, let alone their own, take out of it if you're a farmer or whatever. So look, and in terms of do we get good information, we go through a really robust process when it comes to appointing directors. Ask them. We interview them, and being interviewed by this lot, geez, daunting stuff. But we're confident the people we've got bring that skill set, the diversity of background, the businesses they've been involved in, the careers that they've had or are continuing to have to the table. As far as the trustees are concerned, Colin, you appoint them. All right? Let's be very clear about that. The council appoints them. And you were heavily involved in that process this year. So, we've got two newbies that are adding real value around that space. So, if you haven't got confidence in the trustees, sack us.
Thank you, Colin. Christine? Kia ora. Thank you, Moira. And I think, Christine, we're heading over the other side. Thank you, Tina. I'll hand that to Richard Searle.
Yes, we did make a contribution to the Toitu program. It wasn't necessarily, it wasn't actually a direct financial contribution, so the Trust was heavily involved when they were initially looking at where they could set up their prefabrication facility that's currently at Aerodrome Road. So there was quite a bit of work that needed, and probably acknowledge the council at the same time. So the Trust, the council and the Toitu and Built Smart all came together to look at the options, and we surveyed quite a number of options around the region. And one of the big considerations was how fast it could go, because it needed to be consented really quickly. There's a whole range of considerations around houses being built on site, quite long operating hours. A lot of those homes get moved out in the middle of the night, so actually finding a site was quite tricky. So we worked very closely over quite a number of months, and in the end we're able to do it on port land, and so we were able to facilitate a lease arrangement with the port and get it stood up and going, and it's fantastic, and they're going from strength to strength out there. Kia ora.
Thanks, Richard. Thank you, Tina. And I think Patrick.
Thank you, Patrick Willock, Eastland Helicopter Rescue Trust. I'm just standing to acknowledge the input of the Trust into our service. I thought, as I sat here and listened to Matt talking about the growth of the Waikanae Surf Club and how a small amount went into it and what's happened, so I just thought I would reflect with you in 2018 when we were touting to the government for the contract to supply rescue helicopter services. We had a single-engined helicopter and one pilot. As of today, we've got a twin-engine helicopter, 4 pilots, 4 crew and 4 paramedics. When I look around the room here, I see most of us are within cooey of hospital facilities. However, if you live in Hicks Bay, just imagine if you get Crook, you've got a 2 to 3 hour drive to get down unstable roads to get here. The rescue helicopter is an absolute important facility for our more remote areas, and just remember they're part of our community too, so we owe them a duty to make sure we can get them down here. So from a relatively small from the Trust, it's a huge contribution for us, and without the Trust's involvement with us, we would have a rescue helicopter and we would have a fair portion or a portion of our community left high and dry. So we acknowledge the relationship that we've had for a number of years with the Trust now. We really appreciate it. We do our best to make sure that they get some recognition for it. And if you just want a few, think of the Auckland area with a population of 1.4 million people with 3 helicopters. There's over 400,000 people supporting each of those helicopters. We've got one here with about 45,000 people, so a factor of 10. And so to the Trust, thank you very much. You're critical to us, and we appreciate it, and just want to acknowledge that. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick, and thank you for sharing the story of the growth of the Helicopter Trust.
Yeah, hello, it's Peter Jones speaking. I'm one of the beneficiaries, and I'm looking at you lot and dual beneficiaries. On from what Colin said about whether you've been correctly informed, I spent last night listening to a chap called Dr. Mike Joy, who gave a talk on renewable energy, and he made the point to the Greens and to Forest and Bird that there is no such thing as residual energy, and that it is actually more expensive than conventional means of supplying energy. Now, I'm not asking a question, I'm just making a statement for the record. I think you're too heavily invested in geothermal energy, and I think it's going to bite you. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Great. Anyone else before we move on? I think Josh Wharenga.
Tēnā koutou, i te tuatai ki a koe e tā, mō tō i tō karakia ki whakatuwhiratia tā tātou hui te pōnei, tēnei te mihi nunui ki a koe, Sir Derek Lardeli. How lucky are we to have two sirs here in te Tairawhiti. He tino wai maari e tātou katoa. Ki ngā hea mana, tia mana hoki, o EGL, me te trust, tukuna tu te mihi mai oha ki a kōrua mo i o kōrua kōrero i tēnei pō. So just a big me to Sir Derek for starting us off, and also to our chairs for this evening. Josh Wharenga, Deputy Mayor, sorry for not introducing myself prior. On behalf of the council, and I want to acknowledge yourself there, John, you and I have a robust and honest relationship, and that's a good thing, because us as council, we're representatives for the community, and I was thinking there, what can I say? You know, and there are some beneficiaries in here who have received funds, and I love that they get to mihi to you in that way. I get to mihi to you in a different way because our relationship is different. So thank you for the honesty, thank you for the robust debates, thank you for the support that you provide to our community. So I just wanted to stand on behalf of the organisation that I sit in seat number 2 for. But in this case, seat number 1 in regards to the kōrero that I have with yous and the interface that I have with the trustees. Thank you very much for your guys' mahi. May we continue to have robust and honest conversations as we move forward. Tēnā koe. Tēnā koutou.
Kia ora, Josh. And I think we'll move on to the close of the meeting. But before we do that, just want to thank you all for coming out again and your contributions, your questions, your statements, sharing your thoughts, and being here to I guess show as beneficiaries of the trust your interest in Trust Tairawhiti, and that's really valuable to do that. And thank you to everyone that has attended online as well. We really appreciate your support and attendance online. And we will close our hui shortly and send us on our way for the next year to so our trust staff, our trustees, and everyone here can demonstrate their trust values of te mana, te ihi, te wehi, and delivering the trust vision for our communities of shared pride, shared prosperity, and shared opportunity. I guess having been in the trust for the last 5 years and no longer, also know the work that goes into not only these evenings, but developing the reports that you're able to read through, take away, and ask your questions based on. So I just wanted to give a little bit of a shout out to some of my former colleagues who work in the finance teams, and Phil and Mariana, and also Aaron with Eastland Group. And I know the sheer amount of time that goes into doing the end of year accounts and developing these reports. And also want to give a shout out to my old team, the comms team, and to Christine and Grace, and to Briar with Eastland Group for the energy that you guys put into pulling together annual reports, and also being able to share the year that was with our community. So massive effort. Thank you very much. So please stay on afterwards for some light refreshments over there, and there might be an opportunity to engage with the chairs, the acting CEs, our trustees. We've got a couple of directors here and some staff through the room as well. So to engage, have a chat about some things that you weren't quite able to ask or that you're interested in that you might have picked out of the annual report. You're very welcome, and we'd love to have a chat afterwards. Lastly, I'd love to hand over to Derek to close our hui and send us on the right path for the next year ahead. Kia ora, Derek.